Great work, Nick. I mean, what a thickly, intensely uh, layered score. And I mean, I think that there are some places where it might be a little too thickly layered, but like we'll talk about that as we go, all right? But we're just going to take it one page at a time, one screen at a time, starting with this lovely beginning right in here. I love the sul tasto strings, and they're all, it's actually pretty nicely, pretty nicely put together. Like here's a situation where we've got, we've got it's there's no change of the quality of texture, and yet I didn't feel like we were like that the emotion wasn't progressing in the emotional character wasn't progressing. I felt that it was actually pretty strong, pretty strongly scored, even though it just started off being winds. Okay, so let's start off here. We've got these nice artificial harmonics here, and I really think this is overkill. I think that like the altalone, all down bow. I mean, it's a nice idea, but like I can't imagine this also being. I mean, it seems like you would want like an up bow here. I could imagine two downs, but then I would want an up and then a down again. But I would say it's better like the altalone, the down bow, like those are really that's really more of a really intense kind. It's like there's a famous passage of all down bows in the second Borodin symphony, right? And many other instances in later romantic Russian scoring where you see that, and it really is more of like just a fiercely intense kind of a stroke. So here I feel it's a little, it's this is like a beautiful, it's like chiffon or silk or and you're giving it a leather or like you're giving it like an iron glove, right? This is really just it's like a punch in the face kind of articulation style, which you're giving to like really soft, incredibly beautiful, intense, like, and you're saying sul tasto, right? So like it's already that is like a a very, I mean, they're going to be playing a bit sul tasto anyway. They'll be playing further away from the bridge as it is, but I mean it's fine just marking it sul tasto all the way through, just to get that quality, to really bring out that quality. That is all fine. So you're doing great. I like the little dip here in strength, and then the push into this. Okay, but like if you've been following some of these other evaluations, you will know by now that I am giving everybody the hairy eyeball for this kind of thing. Like this is a piano style articulation mark, or slurring, right? This is taken right out of the piano score. Right, so do you really mean for there to be no emphasis on the downbeat here? Do you really mean to tell these players to slur over repeated notes? And are you thinking about what that means, what the character that means? And the reason why I ask this is that it is happening in so many of these entries that I'm thinking that people are not thinking about that, right? It is giving me that impression. Now, maybe you're the exception. I don't know. I think this could be tied to a dotted half note myself, right here. So just really watch out for that kind of stuff. Really, just if you in these orchestration challenges, if you get something that has a slur over it or a pattern of slurs or whatever from the piano part, question it, question everything. All right, because I think you would get like if this were like articulated on the down bow, right? Like if this were a down bow articulation followed by an up bow, I think you get more of a graceful feeling of pulse here. And then if this were like portato, right, or just not even slurred at all, I think you would also get a better sense of pulse. Okay, and then here, this is beautiful. We have actually everybody bowing on the downbeat, but then you follow it by not bowing on the downbeat for the next 3 bars, right? So just really watch out for that kind of stuff. But, I like the lower strings. I like the independence of the bass that you've got in here. I think that's all really, really cool. And I love the fact that you have crescendo and you've got a destination dynamic. But I will say one thing. I don't feel that this is really like leading anywhere with respect. All right. So let's look at the dynamics here. Piano, diminuendo, and then a sort of like a pulse, and then back down to piano. So that would sort of almost suggest that you are going to be crescendoing louder here, right? Because you are ending up down at piano, right? So this really seems like this is, da, right? We're ending up here. So it isn't going to be like literal. If we were to take these dynamics literally, you would be going down to say almost pianissimo here, and then pianissimo crescendo upwards to maybe piano, and then back down to pianissimo. So it isn't. So, but that isn't obviously is not your intention. You don't really want it to go da da, right? You're not intending to get softer back down to pianissimo, maybe ish, and then suddenly be louder at piano, right? So I think you need to mark a dynamic here just to clear up the confusion here. Piano, diminuendo, crescendo back up to, I would say, mezzo piano here, right? And you wouldn't need to mark that in your double bass part at all. And then diminuendo back to piano, right? So that way you have got like this arc where you sort of dip down and then you come up a little bit bigger and then you end up back down at piano again. All right, then we have this crescendo, this sort of this pulse in here. And then we have crescendo. So crescendo, and then you only end up at mezzo piano here. So that isn't much of a crescendo, is it? All right. So crescendo plus a crescendo plus, but you only end up at mezzo piano from a piano here. Doesn't really seem like it really went very far, right? What if this ended up being all the way up to mezzo forte? And I think it would really bring out that bass line really nicely, which I think is nice and tasty. I think that everything works, but the problem with this, the way that you've got this bass line scored, is that it doesn't lead. It like everything else is sort of is leading its way down to, like, this is leading its way down to E in a really logical sense, right? And then you got this line here, and then the dropping from the A to the E, right? Works really well. But here you're jumping up from B to E, so that it's not the biggest conflict. It's kind of a fun, it's kind of sort of fun the way that it's scored. But what it adds to is a sense of it's a bit of a non sequitur, right? I feel that the bass, the E in the bass doesn't quite follow, right, from where this line is leading, right? I mean, literally, the voice leading is not. Right, so that's one of the problems in there, and I'm not going to go into big suggestions on how to fix that, but it's just a note that if you add things like bass lines and other kinds of things underneath a beautifully fully worked out piece of music by another composer, you really have to think it through, right? You really have to think through adding a new function to the music. What does that do to the overall shape harmonically, to the sense of does the cadence settle the right way after you do something like this, right? So you just have to think that out. But other than that, and other than like the tweaks to the dynamics, I think it's actually pretty nicely scored. I don't think you need 3 or 4 down bows in a row, because then the whole question is do you want us to keep going down bow all the time? Right? Like if this were just intended for, and then I would say norm afterwards, right? And you really have to tell the players that, otherwise it was just this little idea I had, and then afterwards you can just go back to normal. But I think that it is not. I think it's completely unnecessary. Like I said, it's it's like a it's like a velvet hand in an iron glove, right? It's like it's the opposite of what what they say, like a iron fist in a velvet glove or whatever. It's the opposite way around. It's just too it's too much energy, I think, for the beautiful soft sul tasto kind of character of this passage. But otherwise, nicely done. Now, this next screen starts out really nicely. I think it's a cool idea to have the strings all in octaves. Now, I just want to say one thing, and that was that the mix was really weird on this, and I had to go in to the the mixer on in Sibelius and just sort of work out a and just to look at it right here, you've got your horns, your brass, like really boosted up, and you've got your strings, which the kind of the gentler instruments, really dropped quite a ways. And I think these the winds are pretty much where they would normally be. But just it just really throws a lot of things out of kilter. And in without me having adjusted, this is the original mix. And I had to go in and just normalize everything. So just watch out if you're using a different sound set or something like that. Just let me know, or make a mock-up from that sound set and send it to me. Okay? Because just some very weird stuff that seemed out of balance. But even with that, you could hear on the mock-up that as things progressed along this page, the possible weaknesses of this approach started to become more and more pronounced. Even with the mix being fixed a little bit, right? And I'll get into that in a minute. Okay, but so having said that, not to give anything away too much, I think it's a cool idea to have like separate functions and separate sections. That doesn't bother me at all. So just really having a lush, beautiful, stacked melody here in your strings with some harmonization in the middle. I think that's all really cool. I sort of miss the like some of the some of the stuff going on in here is not doesn't fully realize what was happening in the piano, but that's all right. Well, it's not to get into it, not to quibble or anything like that. But I still think it's really cool. Yeah, you've got your octaves here in the octave melody here, and you've got the thirds and so on, and you've got an added bass line, sort of the melody as bass line. Okay, but I think like if you're gonna say La Melodia ben cantando, right, in a sort of very well sung melody, then not really give us any nuances, right? What does that say? So shouldn't you be really, really guiding the players here? Like maybe da 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 da. Just really write in hairpins and just really play. Show the players around the piece, right? And just allow this to speak out, right? And I think that would help to balance some of the other things going on. Now right in here, like, I feel that like you didn't really even need to have the contrabassoon. Like, I think that there could have been ways of shuffling some of the lower pitches, so it wasn't so grindy and grunty way down there. It just really feels grunty. Having tuba, contrabassoon, it just really feels you've already got the double basses down here. I know they're not on that same low octave, but I almost think that like this would have been stronger if or more balanced, let's say, not stronger but better balanced, if the cellos were divisi, this part were in the lower divisi cellos, and this part, the harmonizing part, was in the higher divisi cellos, and then this were played by double basses rather than tuba, because tuba is just so powerful. It just, even in a delicate texture like this, it's like a foghorn. It really kind of like I would almost say like you should mark this pianissimo, right? But even at that, the overtones from the tuba really kind of mess up the beautiful colors that you could have get out of this, right? And then on top of that, you have like these octaves here in the bassoons just really feel kind of brutal, compared to all the delicacy of the harp and all the other elements that you have got going on here. Now, like you don't really need to interpret every exact, pitch that the piano is playing. You don't have to transcribe it directly, right? And which you don't. Like you go on and explore things, right? So like it just feels really kind of grindy down here, right? Even keeping things low at the beginning, you could, I think you could lighten things up, right? Like for instance, you could have your bassoons, like this part could be played on bass clarinet higher, and then have the bassoon take this over, and it would just immediately lighten things up. Have the contrabassoon dovetail over to which bassoon player? Right? Just to flip up for a second, how many bassoons? We got 2 bassoons, right? So which bassoon player is playing this, right? Which clarinet player is playing this? Which flute player is playing that? You got to work on your entrances, okay? In your winds and brass. Tell us who is doing what. Anyway, so just as an example, right? Or you don't even need to have the octaves. The octaves make things incredibly heavy right in here. You could have contrabassoon trading off to bass clarinet, and immediately you get a much lighter texture. And then you can vary it up, right, by having bass clarinet come in, and then clarinet, and then or back to bassoon, and then clarinet, and then bassoon, and then contrabassoon trading off to bass clarinet on these notes. Cut these upper notes, right? So contrabassoon trading off to bass clarinet, and then to bassoon, and so you just get this lighter texture right in there. But one thing is for sure, like even marking this at piano and this at piano, the harp has just got zero chance of of being heard right in there. At piano, I would mark it up to like mezzo forte or mezzo piano, right? I would definitely. This is where I would balance things out. All right, so going onwards, like things start to get higher and higher. You're having this celesta duo and the harp and everything, and it's a cool idea on the face of it, but like when it starts getting up into the piccolo range and everything else, I feel that it just really kind of throws off the balance with the rest of the strings, right? It just, I think it's the real risk here is not so much that the balance is thrown off here in terms of the functions, but like what is going on the next screen, right? When we get to this part, I feel like we've with so much focus on these higher pitches, we've taken away the magic that happens here, right? Because you're sort of, it's almost like you're spoiling it, right? Like spoilers, right? So it's like, yeah, we're going to have this thing that creeps really, really beautifully high eventually, but like here's a taste of it before we do that, right? So it kind of, I feel like this could have been saved for what happens later. Okay, so pianissimo crescendo to mezzo piano crescendo to what? Don't the basses get a mezzo forte in here? Right? It isn't enough to tell them that they're going to get louder. You have to tell them what the destination is going to be. Same thing with a timpani player, right? And really, really important that they don't crescendo up to forte, right? You just have to really watch out. Really make sure everybody's got their destination dynamics. In fact, as far as that goes, is you could have just had a crescendo all the way up to mezzo forte here. You could just cut this, right, and just have one long hairpin in both parts. I think would have worked fine. And if you intend to balance these so that the timpani is softer than the double basses, pianissimo to crescendo, one long hairpin crescendo to mezzo forte, triple P, one long crescendo to a mezzo piano, right? But I don't know. Yeah, this is all good. Like you can have A, D, and then D an octave lower. It's going to be this low rumble is going to be it's going to feel a little soggy, right? It's not going to have the same, and you've already got that same pitch here, right? But I can understand the impulse of wanting to dive the octave here. Okay, that's all fine. this was one of those places in the mock-up where I really felt that reducing the volume of the strings really worked against. And I think even in what I tried to adjust, it still didn't. The strings didn't really come out all that strongly. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of cool though, like surging up to mezzo forte and then down to pianissimo and back up to mezzo forte. I mean, it's a really neat kind of idea. All right, but you got some things working against your beautiful idea here. All right, okay, and we'll talk about them now. One is that you have like you have this idea of this beautiful icing in your harp and celesta. Okay, but did you notice in the mock-up we just really couldn't hear them at all, right? And that's what your mock-up is telling you is the truth, right? That is actually going to be what's happening in concert, because celesta is an incredibly delicate instrument. Like, I mean, you might have better luck with a glockenspiel on these pitches. Like, it would bring a lot clearer, and you'd have way more dynamic control. But like the honest to God truth about the celesta is that it is its loudest dynamic that you could possibly get out of the instrument is mezzo piano compared to the rest of the orchestra. Like whatever the average of mezzo piano is across the rest of the orchestra, that is fortissimo or forte on the celesta. Now, by the same token, like what is the softest that the celesta can play is about like piano, right? I mean, yeah, pianissimo-ish almost, right? But like if you really use a light touch on the celesta, then it's harder to get the little hammers to hit the bells, right? So you can't be too soft. And it can't be too loud because there's a limited amount of force that the hammers, hitting the bells, they can't really get all that loud, right? And the bells aren't all that loud in the celesta. So, so that's working against it. And then we already know harp is extremely limited. By the way, the dynamics should go in between, right? It should go in the middle of the harp, even in a part like this. This could be. I think I did a little bit of. Adjustments to your score. I think, like cutting some empty staves out and so on in certain pages. And anyway, so some of this is probably my fault in terms of the layout. But the dynamics should go in the middle. All right, but like harp is already really soft, and when you have these big, huge, surging wind lines in here, like I just think that the icing on the cake, is just being overwhelmed by the gravy, right? And then there's like, it's just some of this harmonization just feels a little awkward to me. Some of the way that these parts are scored, just that, it just didn't rub me the right way. Some of the choices right in here, but I mean, in general, I mean, it's not a wrong idea. It's just maybe it needs a little bit more work. Okay, interesting rolls and the trills and so on, and the timpani and double basses, not bad at all. And then this, just kind of hanging on this chord and letting the winds go forward. But once again, I felt like this really kind of, was all of the stuff, very, very high winds and so on, did kind of give things away. Now, the character of what you scored here, what's the dynamic for these players? Shouldn't they have their entrance dynamics? The character of what you scored here is really beautiful and unique and everything else. This is strange. You've got a roll mark on your clarinets here. Maybe I guess it was copy paste from the harp. But yeah, just make sure that you delete things like that. All right. Okay, but beautiful and subtle, and I love the way that the lines all sort of wandered into one another. I would say, like, even with this pitch right in here, handing off to the flute, I think you should dovetail. Okay. There's a missing dovetail right in here, and the break between the two colors is going to be really obvious without it. And then this is really cool. Now, all right. So I just have to say, this is not going to be as smooth. Like, this is going to be beautifully smooth. Bassoon handing off to bass clarinet, handing off to clarinet, and so on. You could have the bassoons hand off directly to your first clarinet, right? You don't really need the bass clarinet in between. I think it's sort of a distraction. I would say just go straight from bassoon to clarinet and so on. I don't think there would be any difference, except that it's just more to worry about, right? It's like this player coming in between these two. It's just more of a question of whether or not the timbre is, like, the player is going to match, and it's just more things that could go wrong for not very much of a payoff. All right. But right in here, like, you're pushing the tuba rather high on a pianissimo, and you're pushing the trumpets way up to A on a pianissimo. Okay, it's not the most comfortable thing to play for the trumpet player. And then you're interspersing, like, you're going tuba to much softer instrument, English horn, to a much less in control instrument of trumpet, and so on. So you might want to rethink. I mean, it's a cool idea. I mean, I wish maybe if the trumpet had come in earlier, if this were, I don't know. I mean, there's just a bunch of ways that you could have reshaped this. But one thing is sure, like pianissimo to piano to pianissimo, right? So, like, the balance here is even the really soft dynamics, it's still the tone weight is still heavier. Maybe if the trumpets were muted or something. But yeah. So look, you are the orchestrator. You do not need dashed dynamics. You make the decisions. You put in the thing. Don't put in dash dynamics unless the conductor might possibly want to leave them out, right? But that, this is all your decision. You are the god of this orchestration, so you don't need dash dynamics. Like, that would only be like if you're adding something to a piece that has some kind of tradition or some other kind of thing, but you don't need it in this context. But I thought that this was actually really nicely done. I love that. I think the trombones down here were cool. I like the way that the wind sort of tailed downwards and with the harp and everything else. Very, very, very cool. I think the slur could go all the way down to here. Just could be one long slur. All right, so right in here, we go back to contrabassoon and trading off to bassoon, and I mean, I think this is all fine. I think that if you really want the harp to stand out, you're gonna have to, once again, it has to be mezzo piano or mezzo forte even, to blend in with this. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a long time for this same, just very kind of close together kind of pattern to be going on, especially with the introduction of this this really intense tremolo happening right in here. But I would say, like, the thing that feels the most out of balance to me is just like telling the cellos to play these thirds and having no doubling on them, right? Because you've got this octave and it's intensely doubled by the winds. Even, everybody being soft and so on. Marked piano, ben cantando. Once again, ben cantando without any guidance of, like, any kind of breathing into the phrase, or, like, I'm not seeing any, But I mean, I like the fact that you're not using piano style slurs and so on. That's all really cool and works really, really well with the bowing. But I think you need more guidance here for the players. But you could, in the mock-up, you can barely hear. I mean, once again, everything's out of balance. You can barely hear the middle voice here in the cellos because the strings are so soft. Right, and the harp is incredibly loud. Right, in a realistic situation here, the harp would be having a real problem trying to balance with the bassoons. Right, they're like the bassoons being soft. That's exactly the right place to put them. The harp being mezzo piano, maybe mezzo forte, would be a good balance. All right. And then, but like if you're going to bring out this tremolo G, I think you need to have something change about the some expansion or some other kind of thing happening with the interpretation of the transcription of the left hand patterns. Now here, I'm not so fussed with the flute going down into, going all the way down to A and so on and so forth. And I think this is okay. If everybody is soft, I think you can achieve a kind of a balance here. Okay. But yeah, I just think if you're gonna have the melody so heavily doubled, you're gonna have this doubled as well. It could be like horns playing pianissimo, or it could be clarinets or something else. But just there needs to be a little bit more weight right in there. And then now here, like we're running into kind of arbitrary dynamics, right? Like here you're giving a destination dynamic to your violas and your double basses, but what's the destination dynamic for everybody else? Do they get up to fortissimo? Do they go to forte? Where do they go? Crescendo and diminuendo, what does that say to the players or the conductor or whatever about your intentions? And there's nothing like that happening in the bass, right? Do you really intend that just to sort of stay submerged? And if that's so, then like how loud can things get without drowning them out, right? So you got to think this stuff out and really be clear about those directions. I would say I don't even think you need the crescendo mark for. I think that this is fine, and I would say poco a poco crescendo. Anything over 2 bars, make it a poco a poco, not just crescendo. Okay, crescendo with a dashed line, or poco a poco crescendo with no dashed line. All right, is what I would say for anything over 2 bars. And then crescendo should be 1 or 2 bars of crescendo. But in this case, I would just put in a hairpin to a destination dynamic of whatever, maybe forte and then diminuendo, and then you really have to think about what you want here, whether you want your bass line to surge along with the rest of the orchestra. Now, here at D, Nick, I'm wondering if you, like, if you accidentally, like, duplicated some bars. Right, because it's supposed to go da 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 bum bum to the next part, right? Bum bum da 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 dum. All right. So I think that like there's some duplicated bars in here that like were substituted instead of what is happening. So it actually makes this really quick to for me to analyze, because it's really kind of the same thing over and over again, right? So like there's pretty much the same approach. So I will just treat it as such, as if this were what Barvinsky intended, and then we'll move on to the next section. But yeah, so here I felt that this is a little too if you know what I mean. It's a little. I mean this like basically doubling the harmonic accompaniment at an octave lower. It just really brings down the overtones, the resulting overtones across the middle register of the orchestra, and the kind of the distraction from the lower pitches of like kind of hearing these harmonizing pitches rather than the actual just kind of playing over the F sharps and so on, and the other lower pitches that are intended to be. Do you know what I mean? It just feels. I don't know. It feels a little clunky to me. Just dropping this down here, and then also kind of the lack of, like, you've got a nice doubling going on of your melody here, the octave melody, but like really no doubling of the harmonization in the middle, right? So I'm not totally sold on the approach that you used here in the but I mean, the melody is fine. It's kind of cool that you didn't make it go too high just yet, right? And just kind of save that up for later. And I really like this. I like the sort of the kind of rising up to meet the splashing downwards, cascading octaves. That's so cool. I think that worked. I mean, this is one of the best examples of interpreting that. I'm just so disappointed that that these middle bars were kind of copy paste instead of like the developing melody, right? Because there's so much about this Barvinsky prelude that is just kind of like just reusing material rather than proceeding onwards to like to a intense development of the melody that kind of leads places. So like it just feels a little bit too much going along that particular line. And I would say also like that the weight of these cascading octaves, especially with you adding bass trombone and tuba and everything else, it's way heavier than you think it is. Like you've got bass trombone, tuba, you got the lower winds coming in and everything else. So like against all of the might of this beautifully scored cascading octave kind of function, you basically just have one oboe, or maybe this is two oboes, and clarinet, and they're just sort of sitting on the first violin line. You got nobody doubling the second violin line. You got nobody doubling the violas. Right, and there are all these available people. What are they doing? Trumpets, horns, they could be pitching in easily, beautifully. And I think that would solidify this, and then you don't need to have this kind of grinding around in the basement here harmonically, right? And the lower strings can play a role, maybe lightening up this, so taking some of the weight off of some of the the having to force the lower brass to take so prominent a role in the function, right? So anyways, it's just a thought. All right, and then so watch out going to triple forte so soon, especially with really high piccolo against mezzo forte in the winds and a crescendo that isn't up to fortissimo by the end of this bar, right? So just really be careful about that. Okay, and then here we have trumpets coming in finally doing their part to bolster up the melodic function. And that takes us to the climax of the piece. All right, so I really like the what you have got going on here. This really just feels like a page right out of Ravel. I mean, I like the swooping glissandos, and I like this sort of stacked horns and trumpets and strings, and I think it's really cool the way you've got everybody working together here. Now right in here, I think this is a little much for your bass trombone player. I mean, I think it's possible, but I just think it's chording, possibly slightly chording disaster. I would break this up between the tuba and the bass trombone myself. I mean, if we look at what happened before, like you were really kind of keeping it limited to a limited set of pitches, right? But now, you really just have this, like this is really more, I mean, even contrabassoon, right? It just seems a bit much. I would try to limit the contrabassoon, like just going up to this G and then just coming back in, maybe playing this E. All right, just try to avoid this kind of stuff. I mean, it is possible, but it's just really wearing out the player, and they've got to play all these really low notes and just really dig into them, and you're using up their breath right in here, just in their technique. And it's, so, and I mean, to a degree, the same thing is true of the bass trombone, right? So, like, I would just break it up. I would have like have the tuba come in and play this, going up to the G, trade, dovetail, and then have the tuba come in. All right, and then just trade off. Just give them, even in here, right? Just give them some sense of play, and so on. And the double basses can stay the way that they were. Alrighty. So look, there's really no need for you to so heavily harmonize the strings, right? Because what happens is, like, yeah, it sounds cool when you just isolate this section and you play it. It just sounds very, very throat in the mouth, or sorry, excuse me, has a heart in the mouth kind of sound. But like the thing is that it's like a lot of it is just going to get obliterated by the by the horns and the trumpets anyways, right? So like if you were to just hike up the strings like more into like kind of octaves and simple harmonies above the brass's more intense integral complex harmonies below, I think that you get a way better effect. Okay, and that kind of is going to lead on to a discussion here of like the roles and the functions of the instruments, but let's not spoil it. All right, so just like here you've got divisi into 4, divisi into 3, and and I just feel like it is really kind of wasting what's good about those instruments, right? Like they really could be contributing in a much stronger way against the onslaught of the brass, which I feel is actually scored pretty nicely. I mean, you got some high B's in here, and but that's okay. At forte and so on. It's going to want to be fortissimo, really. There's no need to really hold it back. I think if you scored the strings out a little bit more, less divisi, more like in octaves and simple harmonies above, I don't think you need to hold back on your trumpet so much like this. But that said, it really is a lot of weight on this lower function of the broken octaves. But not completely inappropriate, but yeah. So look at that. Like you could have had your, like I said, the strings up higher above your brass, catching some of the overtones, maybe doubling some of what's going on in the first trumpet. And you could have had some of that doubled by flutes and oboes and so on until you got to the trill. So there's really is almost like an underuse of your resources here. Now we have to have a discussion about what you're asking your timpanist to do, right? I mean, just in general, like I'm just kind of curious about like what was the plan. Like C, F, E, and then you had like the D octaves below or before, excuse me, in the score. And then here you just have a big array of pitches: C sharp, B sharp. I mean, this is all like accessible on a big, on like the biggest kettle, on like a modern one that can go all the way down to sounding B sharp or C, C natural. So I mean, but like this would be basically like the timpanist would be rolling, and then they would have to adjust the pedal down quickly, and then roll down a half step, and then roll back up a half step, and so on, or lever it. Right? There's some timpanis have like levers that you can just shift quickly to the next pitch, which a lot of timpanists don't like to use because they're so to them that's imprecise. But with this much weight, all playing at once, the bass trombone and the double basses and so on, the contrabassoon, an octave below that, it's all, it's doable. It's not going to be so weird, but yeah. Okay, so like, all right, so my problem with this, all right, I feel like you are orchestrating this with one hand tied behind your back. Okay? I think you just have great instincts as an orchestrator. Maybe the mix is not so great on this, on the mock-up and so on. I don't know why. Maybe you're using another sound set or whatever. But like, I think that you have some really good instincts. But like right in here, like, I think you could have had a soaring melody here, with the strings on top doubled by winds, just to really make them nice and strong. I wouldn't say dry detached. I would just have staccato articulations. you know, or you could have, you could say staccatissimo maybe, or you could say, secco, right, below, right, just to really make sure that it's incredibly dry. But as repeating instruments, you're using your bassoons and your trombones and your strings, right? And they really, the trombones are basically at fortissimo. They're going to shout out everybody else, like the strings and the oboes and bassoons and so on and so forth. I mean, they'll contribute a little bit, but you could sort of hear in that mock-up, like they really, you can't really, like the whole sense of arcs right in here are very hard to tell, like, very hard to distinguish. So, you could have had the sort of octave thing happening here in your horns and your trumpets, just with maybe first and second or first and third trumpet playing the octaves together, and then you could have had your other unused trumpets going, helping out the trombones, the horns going, kind of doing the da 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 kind of repeated notes, and then the trombones doing the arcing parts, right? And that would have freed up an enormous amount of weight for you to be putting into, like, maybe extra heaviness on these low notes. More of a soaring kind of a, like, for instance, like just the strings are really wasted in here. They just don't really bring out the kind of, the arcs and the flow and the, and they can't compete with the trombones at all, right? So they could be bringing in, they could be playing this, just much, they could be, some of them could be doubling what's going on in the horns and the trumpets, and some of it could be much higher, doubled by winds and so on and so forth. So you get a really big, kind of, like I said, like a very soaring kind of a melody. Yeah, and then just like, right in here, like it just kind of continues on with the same basic approach, and I feel like what I'm suggesting, like dividing up the duties, the functions of the music differently across the instruments, I feel that you could end up with, just the potential to really take this this tutti section in new directions, in like pushing it higher and higher, with the option of having higher winds and strings and so on, right? We got no piccolo, we got no flutes right in here, right? So I think you could really but look, like the approach that you had in here, I think it works fine, except that the trombones are going to basically just obliterate all of these middle range, like these higher strings playing in a medium position. The trombones are really going to be what you hear, right? They're gonna shout over these winds and strings, right? So you might want to rethink this, and especially with the weight of the melody, and you've got bass trombone now, and the horns and the trumpets and so on. So it's really, but I actually really like this a lot. I think that actually horns coming in here and just dropping the heavy brass and so on, but keeping the clarinets and keeping the horns and ba ba bum, and then just keep it up. Don't actually have a diminuendo at the end, and then everybody hang on to the last chord, and then quickly diminuendo down to just the strings. Then but like it's, I just feel like the potential, like I'm wondering, I'm seeing a few of these kind of longer interpretations, longer orchestrations, where like the last, like this big climax section is not quite as fully scored as it might have been, and I'm wondering if that's just kind of running out of time, or or just still tinkering with it by the time the deadline happened, and there wasn't attending to everything else kind of took away time from this or something. But yeah, but look in general, I know I'm really critiquing the hell out of this, but the reason is because I feel that you really have got something here, and like I think you should really work on it, and you're putting so much so much effort and so much quality into this scoring, and I really really like it, and I admire the different directions and the different colors that you are aiming for, and the overall vibe of the music, and I find it really enchanting, and I mean, it's the kind of thing that I really wish I could sit down with you for a few hours, like it actually be like more of a mentor than just a coach, right? This like dropping in on a score and saying, watch out for this, take a look at that, consider this option, and so on, right? I wish I could spend much more time with you, but I think it's a really excellent score, really excellent entry. So thank you so much for supporting the orchestration challenge this year, and for helping me help those Ukrainian musicians. I think that was just a really important. It was a really wonderful gesture from everybody, and I actually raised additional money. People kept a lot of people kept their support level higher at the end of last month. So I'll have some additional funds for them, but I'll be announcing that more officially in a week or so, or in a few days. So anyway, so thank you again, Nick, and just keep them coming. I'm just thinking, wow, what would Nick do with like 2023 or 2020 2025? Yeah, there's some really cool opportunities coming up, and I would really love to continue this conversation with you. you know, you work on that score, bring it to me, and I'll tell you, if there's anything that I could suggest fixing about it, or tightening it up, or making it clearer, right? But the one thing I would overall just suggest is just really watch out about making things too intense, right? Like, just try to, like, individual colors are, or just very lightly doubled colors sometimes can have much more of an impact than heavily doubled, tripled, quadrupled emphasis on a line or a bass, or a melody or something. Okay, and I'm saying this after having scored earlier this week, completed a score that was just massive. Just, it was, I was trying to imitate the or evoke the sense of the orchestra sort of shouting along with the choir, end of the concert kind of a song, just with everybody just kind of yelling their head off, and that is some heavy duty lifting with doubling and tripling and quadrupling of certain functions. So, I'm one to talk. Anyways, very, very cool score. So I'm going to take a break now and come back and evaluate another one, and that should also come up today. So, or be released today. So thanks everybody out there. You know what to do. You've been watching this. If you've made it all this way, you know that I need you to add some comments down below. Any feedback that you can give for Nick, things that I left out, things that I didn't have time to talk about, or maybe skipped or didn't notice, or your insights on some of the advice that I gave, it's all welcome. So let's see some of that below. Let's give Nick his due. And thanks everybody. I will see you very, very soon with another evaluation.